How do you get closure after a relationship with a narcissist? A lot of people seem to think that closure might come either from determining that an ex partner was definitely a narcissist, and that would explain the reason that the relationship ended or the reasons for the other person's behavior. Or they imagine if somehow they can get the other person to admit all the terrible things they did, that would bring them closure. Neither of those things are going to bring you closure. My name's Ruth Ann. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can really get closure after a profoundly difficult, hurtful, or even abusive relationship. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. Whilst people struggle after breakups with narcissistic partners, people who are narcissistic also really struggle with breakups. They are a threat to their self-esteem, to their feeling of being okay in the world. They're deeply distressing. And whilst they may not immediately show that on the surface, the sense of defectiveness and abandonment is there. So if you're a narcissist and you're watching this, please listen in, because the advice that I have in this video could really apply to anyone who's struggling with the end of a relationship. Now, I came across a podcast episode recently. It's a podcast that I really love. It's called Reimagining Love with Alexandra Solomon. I will put a link in the description. And in this podcast, Alexandra makes a beautiful statement about closure. And she says that it may be helpful to think about closure as being less about doneness and more about wholeness, more about moving towards recognizing your wholeness as a complete person outside of this relationship. Now, you were a whole person before you got into this relationship. You were still a whole person when you were in the relationship, and you are a whole person now without the relationship. And getting closure may be more about connecting with yourself and your own wholeness than it is about being done with the other person. Now, I often think when people are grappling with whether or not their ex-partner was or wasn't a narcissist, or explaining their behaviors, very often what you're looking for is an explanation. It's an understanding, or maybe it's also a sense of not being the one who's to blame, of freeing yourself from feeling blameworthy and ashamed about this relationship. And often this can be a very busy way of thinking. You can end up watching lots of videos about narcissism on the internet. Maybe this is one in a long line of videos about narcissism that you've been watching. And this kind of busy mind can often be a way of, one, it's trying to make sense, it's trying to understand what's happening to you, but it can also be a way of distracting from your own painful feelings about the loss of this relationship. Now, rather than moving away from those painful feelings of grief, loss, loneliness, sadness, shame, anxiety, maybe anxiety about the future, moving towards those feelings, allowing yourself to feel them, may be a more productive route towards wholeness and closure than ruminating on the behaviors of the other person in the relationship. Now, in order to feel those things, you need to create a gentle, nurturing, warm environment in which you can slow down, you can rest, you can take the pressure off. When we lose someone who's close to us, we give ourselves hopefully a little bit of space to grieve. In some cultures, other people will take care of the person who's grieving. They'll bring them meals, they'll take on their work. They're not expected to do a great deal in that period other than simply be. And giving yourself that time to just be, to be with yourself, to feel anxious, to feel sad, to feel angry and frustrated, to recognize what you have lost. And so often what you've lost may be time in that relationship. It may be a sense of safety. It may be a sense of lovability. It may be a sense of acceptability if you've been in a relationship where you're being abused or you're being constantly criticized or talked down to. But allowing yourself to feel that and to comfort yourself is a really important step in grieving. Another really important aspect of this, if you're able to, is to give yourself the opportunity to connect with people around you who are warm, who are nurturing, who can comfort you, who can hold you through that process. And that may mean talking to them about things that are difficult and painful and allowing them just to listen, just to hear you. And I think it's really helpful if this is not a ranting and venting session about your ex-partner and all the things you don't like about them. Now, listen, I know everybody's done it. I've done it. But those kind of ranting, venting sessions, they're not generally the thing that's going to help you move towards closure and wholeness. Those kind of sessions are likely to lead you into rumination, anger, and frustration. So, whilst you're probably going to have some ranting, I'd also really encourage you to make space for those tender, softer feelings of loss, grief, sadness, fear, shame, all of those things, and allow yourself to lean on, if you can, other people who can support you in that process. This is also a time to really take good care of yourself. Get sleep, get rest, eat good food, create structures and routines that are soft and nourishing for you as much as you're able to, because that creates a sense of safety. It gives you the chance to rest, which you're almost certainly gonna need a lot of. Reflecting on the relationship can also be an opportunity to think about who you became in the relationship, what you lost in the relationship, the needs that you have that were not met in this relationship or may never have been met in any relationship. Really giving yourself to connect with yourself, your own pain and suffering, can be clues into what you need. And maybe you realize that you do have a need for softness, tenderness, warmth, and comfort in your relationships. Maybe you realize that you have a need for protection, safety, security, and boundaries. And recognizing those things means you can begin to intentionally nurture those things, both in yourself internally, nurturing a warm, loving, and nurturing attitude to yourself, and in your outside relationships, so connecting with friends or family who are warm and caring, if that's possible. And likewise, nurturing boundaries and protection and strength, learning how to hold boundaries, learning how to say what you want and need, learning how to ask for things without feeling ashamed for asking, learning how to receive from other people, how to say no to other people, how to say yes with enthusiasm when you really want to say yes, and to only say yes when you really mean it. Learning those kind of skills to have boundaries, strength, and consistency in your relationships, this time outside of that relationship, is a real opportunity to lay the foundations for future relationships of having good boundaries, of being able to say what you want, being able to ask for things, being able to say no to other people, and really exploring different relationship patterns that you may be able to nurture in friendships and in relationships within your family, if that's possible for you. To do that well, you really need to tune into what's going on for you on the inside so you can really recognize what the needs are that you want to nurture and that you want to meet. Now, I also want to talk about no contact, because no contact, the way that we think about it is often aggressive. It's something you do to the other person. But actually, I think no contact can also be done from a place of self-care, self-love, and self-compassion. And that may mean no contact, cutting off this other person entirely, or if you need to have minimal contact because you have shared parenting responsibilities, you begin to bring that contact to the minimum and keep it focused on the tasks that you need to do together. But no contact as a form of self-care and self-nurturing is actually about giving you and also the other person freedom and space to do this kind of work of grieving, of processing the loss, of rebuilding yourself, reconnecting with yourself. Because when you've been in a relationship where there's a lot of narcissism, and to be honest, this works both ways. You can get caught up in the fantasy of the relationship. You can get caught up in the grandiosity of it. You can get caught up in the drama, the highs and the lows. And it can be very disorientating. And in a way, you lose touch with yourself in that relationship. And so this can be a real time of reconnecting with yourself, reconnecting with the whole of you. And in order to do that, giving yourself time and space away from the other person is essential. And I think it's so important to do this in a way that is really focused on you. It's really focused on giving you time and space to meet your needs and to focus on yourself and to make this time after a breakup, after a very painful breakup, a really nurturing, warm, tender, and creative time, which you will one day look back on as a period of incredible growth In order to do that, you need to not be living in the shadow or constantly looking to the other person to be your mirror, to tell you who you are or what you need. So no contact as an act of self-care, as an act of self-compassion, as an act of liberation to free you to focus on yourself can be a wonderfully kind, caring, and self-compassionate act. And I would encourage you, if you are using no contact, whether you're using full-on no contact and this is someone you are able to create absolute space and distance from and have zero contact with, or if you have to have light contact because you've got other responsibilities, I would suggest that you really think about this not as being something you do to the other person, but as a gift that you give yourself, a gift of space, of time, and of freedom. And with that in mind, don't look at their social media pages. Don't post things on your social media knowing that they can see it, thinking, well, I want them to see what a great time I'm having without them. This is about you no longer living in the mind of that other person. It's about you reclaiming your life, your mind, your body, your thoughts, your feelings for you, and moving towards your own wholeness rather than simply doneness with this relationship. And as you move towards that wholeness and completeness within yourself, really the other person here is just not someone that you need to be concerned about. You don't need to be concerned what they think of you, how they feel about you. And that really is what freedom and closure can look like. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe or follow if you'd like to hear more from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take good care.